Hello, Isabella. Thank you so much for joining me for our HerStory interview in our Compassionate Women's Health community.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I love reaching out to people and hearing their personal stories because I find it so important to have it as a resource for others that are in a similar situation and can come and find out, what have other people done? What have other people experienced? So Isabella Gosling is here with me this morning. She's the founder of Let's Talk, a podcasting community for people who want real talk, raw stories, and reputable information when it comes to all aspects of health and well-being. Each week, she smashes stigmas and taboos around wellness, chronic illness, periods, reproductive, and sexual health, and speaks with thought leaders within the health space. Isabella holds both a Bachelor of Education and Bachelor of Nursing. After searching for answers for her pain over 6 years, Isabella was diagnosed with endometriosis and adenomyosis in 2015 at 20 years old. Since then, she has advocated for better care, treatment, and support for those affected by chronic conditions such as endometriosis, adenomyosis, and PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome. So why don't we start with you sharing a little bit more about that part of your story? What were you experienced? What drove you to go to the doctors? And, why do you think it took 6 years?
Yeah, so I guess 6 years is really that typical timeline of how long it does take. There's a diagnostic delay of 7 to 12 years for endometriosis. So I'm kind of one of the lucky ones without being one of the lucky ones. But yeah, from about 14 years old, I was experiencing incredibly heavy periods and horrible back pain, and cramping. And I knew that my period was going to be coming because the back pain would come about a week before and it would be like a pre-warning of your period's coming. And so that was always a fun indicator. And so I managed with having to sleep on a towel, and I do the awkward period school skirt check at school without actually telling anyone. You're like, can you check my skirt? Yeah. Can you check my skirt? Yeah. And so we do the awkward skirt checks and made it through, and just, didn't really think anything of it because we didn't really discuss periods or what was normal and what wasn't normal, and we just went about it. And then this is an embarrassing period story, I guess, but no such thing as TMI. But one day in year 10 English, it was the last class of the day, and I actually did have one of the moments where I did bleed through onto my school skirt. And it wasn't just a little bit of blood, I actually ended up bleeding onto the school chair as well. And, a 15-year-old with a male English teacher, I had no idea what to do. So I was the last person to leave that class, and I abruptly put my chair up on top of the desk, wrapped my jumper around, and I just made it out of there as quick as I could. So sorry to my year 10 English teacher who probably had to deal with that, but I was mortified. Yeah. And then I got home from school and I was staying at my dad's place, and my stepmom was, doing my school laundry, and she was like, do you have some blood on your skirt? And I'm like, oh no, it's chocolate. So that was flat out lie, because I didn't want them to think that I'd bled onto my school uniform. And, that didn't really fly with her. She was like, oh, okay, all right. You sure it's not blood? And I'm like, no, it's chocolate. So I did not fool her at all. But from there, I just started ending up in even more pain, and I'd start feeling really nauseous, and I'd have to call in sick to my after school job at Target. And mum was just like, oh, I don't think this is normal. I think you might have endometriosis, but, I really hope you don't. Surely not, because she was a nurse.
Okay. So had she had experience with heavy periods herself?
Yes. So she had suffered with heavy periods, and the towel trick actually came from her because she used to have to sleep on a towel. And she saw a gynecologist at about 21, and he put her on the pill. and then she was okay. She had no more dramas. And then I'm actually one of 6 children. So mum was pregnant like quite a bit of the time. So she didn't have a period all that regularly from like 30 to 42 years old. So I think it was kind of masked a bit. So she never actually got formally diagnosed with endometriosis, but being a nurse herself, she did hear that word thrown around in clinic, and she's like, you know, I hope it's not this. So from there, in year 11, I ended up going to the GP finally because it was just getting worse. And I got put on the pill, and that worked for a little bit because I could skip my period, which was just the best thing ever in my eyes because I didn't have to put up with anything. But I didn't realize that it wasn't actually fixing the problem because I guess, you know, when you're 16, you've got no idea. So it's not explained to you or anything like that. So that worked for a bit. And then in my first year of uni, I started experiencing breakthrough bleeding all the time. That pain was coming back all the time. And I ended up having to skip uni classes and lectures even more regularly again. And just back to square one. So went back to the GP and changed pills a couple more times. And then the following year, I was like, oh, you know, this isn't getting any better. I'd actually like to see a specialist about this because I, by that point, was in bed a lot of the time in pain, just horrible cramping, horrible bleeding. I was so fatigued. It was just a horrific time.
So this was not just at the time that you would have had a period on
this. Yeah, this started being like all the time. So it sort of cascaded from when I was in high school to just being that back pain before the week of my period, pain on my period, and then I was all good for the next 3 weeks or so, to pain every single day. No matter what I did, I had chronic pelvic pain. Not that I knew that that's what it was called, but pelvic pain over 3 months every single day is considered chronic pelvic pain. And I had chronic pelvic pain for over a year. And so I finally got to see a specialist, and she said, yeah, I think you might have endometriosis, but I don't do surgery. So I will refer you on to another specialist. So I went and saw them, and I had a laparoscopy with him. And I got out of theatre, and he came and saw me that afternoon, and my mum was there in recovery with me, and he said, you don't have endo. And I was super shocked and disheartened because you worry that it is all in your head, and you worry that they're not going to find anything. And that's exactly what happened. And I was so disheartened. And he said, yeah, you've got pelvic inflammatory disease. And I was like, what is that? And he said, so look, I've, charted you some antibiotics, take those, and I'll see you in clinic in a month. Pelvic inflammatory disease is an STD. Have you been sleeping with a lot of people? And I was 19 at the time. And so I was mortified to be speaking about this in front of my mum, and also mortified that he was even asking me that. I'd only had my long-term boyfriend, and I mentioned that to him, and he said, well, are you sure your boyfriend's not cheating on you? So that was a lot to be confronted with, a couple of hours post-op.
The bedside manner of these surgeons has a lot to be desired, I tell you. It's just, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Just horrific. Yeah. Went back and saw him, and he said, look, I don't need to see you again. I only wanted to see you to let you know that you'll probably need to have a baby really soon because PID can cause infertility, and you'll probably need IVF. So only come back and see me when you want to do IVF with me. And so I sat in the car park and just bawled hysterically because, I'd taken the antibiotics, and, spoiler alert, that didn't fix anything. I was still in a lot of pain. So I put up with that for another couple of months and thought, well, it's not endo. Okay, well, I don't know what's causing this. So I was still Googling, and I was reading lots of blogs from people and support groups. And I'm like, I swear it is endo. Like what I have has to be endo, because it's just, I fit so many of the symptoms. So I went back to the GP again and I got another referral. So this is my third specialist, and I saw the specialist and he said, let's switch your pill and come back and see me in 3 months. And I was only in with him for about 10 minutes. And then he was like, yep, I'll see you in 3 months. Let me know how you go. And so then cue the car park tears again. And I was like, I can't live like this for another 3 months, because at that point I was hardly going into uni. I was in my second year of my teaching degree. I was trying to do teaching placements at schools. And I thought, I can't even stand up for 6 hours. How am I even meant to be in front of a class all day? This is ridiculous. So I then was like, no. And so I Googled the doctor I'd just seen, and he specializes in high risk pregnancy and like pregnancy management. So he wasn't really an endo specialist, and I didn't really know that endo specialists existed then, but I knew I wasn't a high risk pregnant person, and I was like, maybe he's not the person for me anyway. So I made the effort to actually post in one of the endo support groups and go, look, I have all of these symptoms. I am certain I have endo. Who can I see in Brisbane that will listen? And so I got the name of my fourth specialist and went back to my GP for another referral. And I said, I want a referral to this person. I'm not leaving until I get a referral to this person. And I saw him, and a week later I was in for surgery. So I saw him and the next week. And that same week that I saw him, I was in for surgery, and he confirmed that, yes, I did have endometriosis, and I also had adenomyosis as well. So that was when I was 20 years old. So it was quite the journey.
Oh, I reckon. So what did that second or that fourth specialist find that second one maybe didn't? Was he able to clarify, why he wasn't?
So I actually took along my photos, because they take photos in surgery. So I took my photos along from my first surgery. And from looking at the photos, he could sort of see patches on my pelvic cavity in the photos that he thought looked suspect of endometriosis. And he was like, I have no idea why this person said you didn't have this. I'm like, 95% certain. So when he went in and took photos, it was evident that there was endo there. And my pelvic cavity was so inflamed because of the endometriosis, and my uterus was so bulky and red and inflamed because of adenomyosis. So I didn't actually have pelvic inflammatory disease at all. I just had endometriosis and adenomyosis. So but it was a relief nonetheless, because it was sort of that confirmation that you aren't crazy. There was something wrong, and at least I could go forward from there.
Yeah, gosh. What a journey, hey? And it really goes to show that there's so much education to be done within that gynecological field for them to understand that, I mean, you get it biopsied and sent away confirmed in the lab that yes, it's definitely endometriosis. Did they do excision surgery in that?
Yes. So the first surgery, I didn't have anything excised because there wasn't anything to excise. But yes, so the second surgery I was with an endometriosis specialist. So he excised all of my endo, and because I didn't even know there was a difference between ablation and excision. So I was really glad that I did get excision surgery, because if you're not seeing somebody who knows what they're doing, you can end up with ablation, which has a lot of negative side effects in itself. So I was really thankful that the fourth specialist I saw was an endo expert and knew what they were doing.
Yeah, definitely. So what has your treatment plan looked like since?
Yeah, so since then, I've been managing kind of holistically, I'd say. I've got a lot of different people in my team. So surgery was one aspect of that. And then I've also had to do hormonal management within that as well. So I currently have 2 IUDs in place.
Mhm.
And I also have the oral contraceptive pill as well. So that's one aspect of it, that hormonal management. But then I've also got, I've been seeing an exercise physiologist. And so they're really helpful with just like creating an exercise regime that can work in with me and what I can do at different points.
Yeah.
I've also seen a
Sorry, do
pelvic physio.
you mind me just
Oh
checking?
yeah, no.
Like, I think that's really interesting to point out, because I know personally my energy levels and my motivation fluctuates throughout the cycle. Is that what you're referring to, that you'll have different sort of exercise
Yeah,
cycle?
yeah. So sort of just tailoring that exercise routine to different energy levels. So when I'm feeling lower in energy, here's what you can do. If you've got some higher energy and no pain, this is what you can do, without overexerting myself and having any pain, because that back pain has been a huge issue for me since 14. And so without trying to aggravate that pelvic area, but also still being able to move and get enjoyment out of moving.
Yeah.
And then alongside that, I've also seen a pelvic physiotherapist, and I would highly recommend seeing one of those to anyone who's been diagnosed with endo, because so much of it is internal, and those muscles and nerve pathways are so oversensitive and hypersensitive after all of that pain for all those years. So working with the pelvic physio is just a game changer. And then I've also worked with a nutritionist off and on as well, just to find out any trigger foods for me and to help reduce inflammation, because endometriosis is very dependent on inflammation, and it's based around estrogen as well. It's an estrogen dependent condition. So just trying to work with health professionals and make that team that can all support and help me the most.
So what do your pain levels look like now, or feel like now these days?
Oh, I'm a completely different person, and I just want to give that person from 2009 to 2015 a hug, because oh my gosh, she went through the absolute wars.
Yeah.
But yeah, like now I'm able to do all of the things I love 95% of the time. I'm no longer in bed in pain all the time. I'll probably have like a pain flare maybe once a month, if that. And it's, nothing compared to what it was. I can manage it with over the counter pain relief and some hot packs. It's nothing hectic like it used to be. Oh, yeah. So, no, definitely need to give my past self a massive hug.
Yeah, definitely. I know personally, when I was diagnosed with adenomyosis back in 2015, I was put on Zoladex. It was a slightly different scenario because I was about to do an IVF cycle. So they needed to shut it down to be able to start from scratch. With that diagnosis of seeing how bulky your uterus was at that point, have you gone through that process to sort of shrink the adenomyosis with something like a Zoladex injections?
I haven't had to as of yet. My marinas generally, like, and I say this generally, they are behaving most of the time. They did slip out of place and I had to have new ones put in, but they've been effective at actually reducing the lining thickness of the myometrium, so that muscle wall of the uterus. So that's been working really well for me currently. But if that doesn't continue to work effectively, then yeah, that would be an option that my specialist has discussed as something that we might need to look into for the future. And I know that that's not a treatment option for everybody, but it's just another thing to have in your toolkit of what might help.
Yeah, that's right. We need those options, don't we? And so what I'm hearing is some of the key sort of turning points for you was getting the right specialist and getting that confirmation that this is the diagnosis that we're dealing with. And then we can go from there and pull together that team of specialists. So it's really not just one size fits all or one solution. Like there's no one magic pill is there for this.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's so individualized and so tailored, which can be really frustrating because even the symptoms, not everybody experiences the same symptoms, and that can contribute to that delay in diagnosis as well.
Yeah, so true. Like personally, yes, mine started with really heavy, painful periods. And even like, I think back to my teenage years, and I think because my mum had experienced such heavy, painful periods, it was normal.
Yeah.
And so we just trundled off to the doctor and got the naproxen, the anti-inflammatory that lasted the whole day, and you were fine. Yes, I had the at school embarrassing breakthrough bleed in the middle of one of those state exams, and like I think I must have been pale white when I walked up to the teacher and just went, I need to go to the toilet. And they were like, you're in the middle of an exam. I need to go to the toilet. Like, so, yeah, as a teenager, I think it was there, but I got diagnosed at 25, it was 2004, 26. But I didn't have the pain a lot of that time. And I was getting acupuncture and naturopathy during that time. And I was traveling overseas, you know, I was like, your lifestyle and your mental health can have such a huge impact on it as well. And I'd like to check in with you on your thoughts around that. Obviously, that's the area in which I work, supporting women's stress and anxiety levels and how that contributes to inflammation. Like, how have you managed that space for yourself?
Yeah. Well, I have identified personally that stress is a huge trigger for me. And whenever I'm feeling incredibly stressed, or there's like a really emotional time for me, that is when I end up in the most pain and I go, okay, you need to relax. So checking in and tuning into my body has been like a huge thing for me. And so not actually letting myself get to that stage before stopping and doing the work, but just doing a little bit every day. So I try and block my time out and check in with what my energy levels are doing and try to not overcommit myself each week. I'm not the best at resting and I do like to be go, 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 but trying to have those times where I'm not doing anything and I can just sort of take it a bit slower and do the things that I like to do.
Yeah, no.
I'm a really big fan of mindfulness. I think, you know, most of us are these days, but just having that time to sit, and I really like the Insight Timer app. They've got so many lovely guided meditations. If you can't sit there by yourself listening to music or whatever, you can just follow along one of those. And then I also am a huge fan of journaling because it just really helps to work through those big emotions and all of your thoughts and feelings. And I really wish that I found that sooner because I think that would have been really helpful when I was first diagnosed as well. So they're the few little things I like to do. And then I also like to go to Zumba as well, which is like not as self-carey, but it's fun to have a dance and, you know, not care what you look like and just have some fun. So yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, that's really cool. So when you're doing your journaling, are there any particular prompts that you do, or you just let it go, let it all out?
Depends what I'm feeling like. Sometimes I'll just sit there and like, you know, vent. But other times I'll use prompts, and I created a free little journaling guide for people with chronic illness because I was getting a few DMs when I was sharing about journaling. People like, oh, well, I don't really know where to start and what do I write about? So I can send you the link to pop in your group for that one as well if you'd like.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
When we post it in the group, feel free to put some of these links.
Yeah, sure, I will.
Insight Timer, I'll pop the two that I've recorded.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Got on Insight Timer for people, because I agree, like having that guidance of something to focus on can be really helpful for, because a lot of us have very active, the human brain is wired to be like thinking. So if you need a little bit more practice on helping that to calm down, then a guided meditation is great. I've got 2 on there. They're only 9 minutes. Personally, I can't do about more than 10 to 15 minutes to squeeze in the day.
Yeah, no, and it's good because it removes one of those barriers from you where you're like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't want to feel silly. So you go, you press play, and you just do whatever the person in your ears is telling you to do. So if we're listening to yours, we just do whatever you're telling us to do.
Yeah, that's it. And I love Insight Time because there's thousands to choose from. So if you
So
start
many.
and you're like, oh, I don't like the sound of that one, you can just find another
Pick
one.
another. Yeah. Yeah. And the more you do it, you get to know what your like style is, I guess, and what you sort of gravitate towards. So yeah, I couldn't recommend it enough. And it's free. So yeah, cost isn't even an issue for that either.
Oh, well, I ended up getting the subscription, and you can do the courses for free, and just the use of the app is a little bit easier when you've got the paid one. And I think it was only like $60 a year or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's worth it. So there was a question I was thinking, oh yeah, so in terms of if anyone is suspect that they may have endometriosis or adenomyosis and they're getting that same pushback from the medical professionals, where do you recommend that they can go and do some of that self-education, that they can go back to the doctors and go, no, this is, I need this, and self-advocate?
Oh, and that's it. It's so much self-advocating and doing all that work yourself, which you shouldn't have to do. But unfortunately, currently that is the way. And if you want those answers, you really do need to fight for them. So there is some really great resources now around, which is fantastic. So there's the Friendo app, so Frendo. And Devil, she created that one. She's from the UK, and it's like a screener tool. So if you're dealing with pelvic pain or heavy bleeding, there's this huge, like not huge, but there's like a really detailed survey that you can fill in, and it gives you sort of prompts, and it goes, look, you might have endometriosis. You should go talk to your doctor about XYZ. And it also has lots of resources in there. And so that's a free app on Apple and Google Play. And then also the Pelvic Pain Foundation of Australia, they've got lots of reputable information too. I have lots of reputable information on Let's Talk Period. So there's a podcast episode that comes out every Monday. That's a solo episode with me talking about something chronic illness related. And then each Wednesday there's an expert or someone sharing their personal story. And so that's a really good source of information. But on Instagram and on the journal on our website as well has reputable peer-reviewed evidence-based information too. So I think a lot of trying to figure out what's going on is finding that information that actually is credible. So that's something that I'm really passionate about providing.
Yeah.
In Australia, we've also got Endo Australia. They do a lot of work in the research space too.
Yeah, it was such good news when the Premier announced the funding for further research into endometriosis, because there's still so much that's not known about it.
For sure.
So yeah, really important.
Yeah, no. And the team at UQ at University of Queensland, Grant Montgomery, he's doing a lot of incredible research into endo and the genomic sequencing, because there's a 70% genetic link to endo. So he's doing a lot of incredible work, him and his team.
That doesn't surprise me, hearing your story, your mum experiencing that, and my mum experiencing it as well. I think it does sort of travel down. It's then just breaking that cycle of thinking it's normal and just get on with it, to saying, actually, there's so much more we can do now and help you with that, so that you can have a quality of life that you're content with, that you're happy with, that you thrive within, that you flourish within.
Exactly. Yeah. And I actually brought my mum along to one of my appointments, and the gynecologist was sort of questioning her, and he was like, look, from the sounds of it, it sounds like you have the exact same thing. And she was like, yeah, well, we didn't talk about it, we didn't know about it. And so I think the generation today is really doing a lot of the work of breaking down those barriers and talking about the things that are, like, in quotation marks, taboo or
Yeah.
shrouded in shame and stigma.
Oh, I know. And just hearing you talk about your experience of, schooling and, mine was almost 18, 20 years earlier than that. And hearing that it's still experienced in that way, 18, 20 years later, it's like, oh my goodness, there's still so much shame around it. And it's like, do you have a tampon? Kind of, it's still 50% of the population. And when you think about endometriosis, the latest statistic I've seen was 1 in 9 women are diagnosed with, and that's the ones that are diagnosed. So there's probably even a higher percent of women who are actually walking around with it without knowing. That's a huge percentage or proportion of the population that's dealing with this. So grateful for the work that you do to help bring that education and resources to the women out there who might be wondering, is this right? And who do I actually go and see to get the decent answer? Particularly for women in regional areas who can't just go to an excision specialist, a few kilometers away from them. They've probably got to fly to someone. So they can't be going to 4 different specialists like that we could in Brisbane here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a huge barrier for regional parts of Australia. I was living in West Queensland, I guess you could say, and I had to move back to Brisbane because they had no services out there. There was the one GP clinic who'd never even heard of Endo, and all I wanted was a referral back to the specialist who I was already seeing. And they were like, oh, I don't know if you need it. And it's like, well, So yeah, I think there's a lot of barriers. I'm going to say COVID is like a blessing in that regard because it's really helped to progress telehealth a lot sooner than I think what it would have, because so many people are on telehealth now and people can have appointments over Zoom, which just is such a lifesaver because you don't need to fly to your initial appointment. You could just have it over Zoom, and then because generally they might not even need to do an internal examination in that initial appointment. So it's sort of removing some of those barriers, which is really good.
Yeah, and that's it. Like they wouldn't be flying and spending hundreds of dollars to spend 10 minutes just told to go on a new pill either.
Exactly.
They can whittle that down to the right specialist for them a lot more easily.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you really felt you needed to share this morning that we haven't covered?
I just want to say, like, trust your gut because, you know your body better than anybody else does. And you know when something's not right. And so, like we said about that self-advocacy work, like you do have to put that effort in. You do have to have the fight. But, your body knows, you've just got to trust that intuition and trust that you're not crazy. Trust that it's not all in your head and that there actually is something wrong with you. And then when you get the name for whatever is wrong with you, if it is endo, you can then go forward and you can have a great quality of life. So you're not just surviving with endo, but you can actually be thriving with endometriosis.
Yeah, that's right. There's so much power in taking that step yourself, empowering yourself to self-advocate. Yes, I know it feels like a fight when you're in the middle of it, and that can feel stressful. But when you're in that mindset of, okay, this is my body, I do have a say. That's so empowering to take that step, and I love that you see more and more on the social media channels of women going, I'm not standing for this anymore. I'm going to step up and advocate for myself and take that power back.
Exactly. And like, as you and I know, knowledge is power. And when you're informed and educated, you can make the best decision for your body and for your life.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. March is International Endometriosis Awareness Month. So this is so perfectly timed to be able to bring some of that awareness to my Compassionate Women's Health community and beyond. So Isabella, I'll tag you in the group and you can share some of those resources that you mentioned, where we can find your Let's Talk Period podcast and any of those other resources. So, and anyone, if you have any questions, Isabella is in the group, and I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions or direct you to where you can find that information.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.